Most people don't realize that emotional distance after intimacy is not always a sign of regret, coldness, or loss of interest. Psychology explains why a sudden emotional shift can happen even when the experience itself felt meaningful. This reaction often confuses people because it seems to contradict what closeness is supposed to create. By the end of this discussion, you'll understand why emotional detachment after sex happens, what the brain is doing in those moments, and how this response shows up in real relationships. You'll also gain clarity about whether this reaction is protecting you, signaling something unresolved, or simply reflecting how your nervous system is wired. This understanding can help you stop taking these moments personally and start responding with awareness instead of confusion. At its core, emotional detachment after sex is often about regulation, not rejection. Intimacy places the brain in a highly stimulated state, both emotionally and physically. When that stimulation drops suddenly, the brain seeks balance, sometimes by pulling inward rather than reaching outward. The human nervous system does not automatically interpret closeness as safety. For some people, closeness activates vulnerability, which the brain reads as potential risk. When the moment passes, the nervous system may create emotional distance to regain a sense of control. One important factor is how the brain processes bonding chemicals. During intimacy, chemicals linked to connection and reward increase, creating a feeling of closeness and emotional openness. When those levels fall afterward, some people experience a temporary emotional quiet that can feel like detachment. This shift can feel abrupt, especially if you expected emotional closeness to deepen. Instead, the mind may go still or distant. That does not mean the connection was false. It often means the brain is recalibrating. Now, consider this question. Do you tend to withdraw emotionally after moments of intensity in other parts of life, not just intimacy? That pattern matters more than the moment itself. People who detach emotionally after sex often do the same thing after emotional conversations, achievements, or conflicts. Intensity triggers a response, and withdrawal becomes a way to recover equilibrium. The brain prioritizes stability over sustained emotional exposure. Another layer involves emotional safety learned earlier in life. If closeness was unpredictable or overwhelming in the past, the mind may associate intimacy with emotional cost. Detachment becomes a quiet way of self-protection rather than avoidance. This is not about disinterest in another person. It's about the nervous system deciding when enough stimulation is enough. For some people, closeness is energizing. For others, it is depleting. There's also the difference between physical intimacy and emotional intimacy. They overlap, but they are not the same process in the brain. Physical closeness can feel comfortable, while emotional exposure feels risky. After sex, the emotional layer becomes more noticeable. Thoughts slow down, awareness increases, and unresolved feelings may surface. Some people respond by turning inward instead of outward. Here's a surprising insight. Emotional detachment after sex often happens in people who are emotionally aware, not less. Awareness can create self-monitoring, which pulls attention inward at moments when others expect closeness. This inward focus can look like distance. In reality, it may be processing. The person is integrating the experience rather than disengaging. Another factor is how people manage expectations. If intimacy carries pressure to feel something specific, the mind may resist. Detachment can be the brain's way of escaping expectation. Think about how pressure affects enjoyment in other areas of life. When something is supposed to mean more, the mind can shut down rather than rise up. Emotional distance becomes relief. There is also the role of control. Intimacy temporarily reduces emotional control. For people who rely on control to feel safe, detachment restores that sense of autonomy. This does not make someone emotionally unavailable, it makes them emotionally cautious. The difference is important. In real life, this might show up as silence after closeness. It might look like distraction, withdrawal, or a sudden shift in tone. The partner on the other side often interprets this as rejection. But here's the key insight. Emotional detachment is usually about the person experiencing it, not about the person they're with. The reaction is internal, not relational. Ask yourself something gently. Do you feel most distant after moments you felt most seen? That pattern points toward vulnerability, not indifference. Another surprising truth is that emotional detachment can coexist with strong attachment. Some people care deeply and still withdraw after closeness. The brain separates bonding from recovery. This separation often comes from a nervous system that processes emotion intensely. Strong feelings require space afterward. Without space, the system feels overloaded. In long-term relationships, this can create misunderstandings. One partner expects closeness to continue, the other needs quiet to regulate. Neither is wrong, but both can feel unseen. Communication becomes crucial here, not explanation. Saying "I need a moment to settle" creates safety without distance. Silence without context creates uncertainty. It is also important to understand that emotional detachment after sex is not always conscious. Many people do not choose it. It happens automatically before thoughts catch up. That automatic nature can create guilt. People may wonder why they feel distant when nothing went wrong. Understanding the mechanism reduces self-judgment. Another layer involves emotional boundaries. Intimacy temporarily dissolves boundaries. Detachment can be the process of rebuilding them. Healthy boundaries are not walls, they're systems that allow closeness without loss of self. Rebuilding them after intimacy is not a failure of connection. Here is a pattern interrupt worth noticing. Emotional detachment does not mean the absence of emotion. It often means too much emotion happening quietly. Some people experience emotional flooding after sex. Instead of expressing it, they retreat. The calm exterior hides internal intensity. This can also explain why detachment sometimes turns into irritability or numbness. When emotions exceed processing capacity, the system shuts down partially. Now consider how this shows up socially. People who detach after sex often do the same after deep conversations or shared vulnerability. They may pull back just when connection deepens. This pattern can confuse partners, friends, and even the person experiencing it. Without understanding, it gets labeled as inconsistency or avoidance. But psychology points to regulation again. The mind seeks balance. After closeness, distance restores equilibrium. Another important insight is that emotional detachment is not always permanent. It's temporary. Once the nervous system settles, closeness can return naturally. Problems arise when people interpret temporary detachment as a final statement. Misinterpretation creates emotional reactions that were never necessary. Here is a reflective question. When someone pulls away after intimacy, do you assume it means something about you? That assumption often causes more pain than the behavior itself. Understanding this dynamic allows both people to respond with curiosity instead of fear. Curiosity keeps connection open, fear closes it. There's also cultural messaging to consider. Society often equates intimacy with constant closeness. That expectation does not fit every nervous system. Some people connect best through shared space and silence. Emotional presence does not always look expressive. It can look quiet. This matters because emotional detachment after sex is often judged harshly. When people understand it as regulation, the judgment softens. Over time, awareness can change how people navigate these moments. Instead of withdrawing completely, they may communicate their need for space. Instead of feeling rejected, partners may allow that space without panic. The deeper insight here is about self-knowledge. Understanding how you regulate after intimacy helps you choose relationships that respect your rhythm. It also helps you show up with honesty rather than confusion. Emotional detachment is not a flaw to fix, it's a signal to understand. Signals lose their power when they're interpreted correctly. As you reflect on this, notice your own patterns without labeling them as good or bad. Awareness alone creates flexibility. Flexibility creates healthier connection. If this perspective helped you see yourself or others more clearly, consider sharing your thoughts in the comments. Reflection deepens understanding when it's shared. You may also want to stay connected for more insights into how the mind protects, connects, and adopts in ways we rarely notice. Sometimes understanding changes everything, even when behavior stays the same.